I know engineers, right? When we say the words feelings, we're like, it's not for me. It's not my space. Like, I'm not a psychology major. Like, why are you talking to me about how you feel? But it is efficiency.
Welcome, Nikki. You put some brilliant words on LinkedIn that I think are so perfectly sum up what's important about soft skills. So I'd like to read that out and talk to you about it, if that's okay.
Thank
What
you.
you wrote was, engineering orgs don't rise or fall in technical skill alone. They scale or stall based on how well their people communicate, lead, and collaborate under pressure. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah. So I've been very fortunate to have worked in a variety of industries, from nuclear to material handling. I've worked at startups and I've worked at Fortune 500 companies. And I have noticed a unifying theme, that if your engineers are not comfortable, not only talking with each other, but talking with what we typically refer to as customer facing portions of your business, you essentially handicap yourself. Because you're not able to take the brilliance of the technical work that you're doing and translate it in a way that other people can understand and take action on. And it goes both ways, right? If you have a brilliant customer facing set of the organization and they're not very comfortable talking to engineers, means they can't translate what customer requirements really mean and hand them to engineers in a way that they can really take action and solve the root problem. I've noticed there's always this bit of what I call like water down or filtering of information. And I truly believe that engineers have the power to learn the right skills that put them in customer facing situations so that there is no more of that like watered down message, and people can start working better together at the forefront and solve even greater problems for not only your customer, but within your organization as well.
Yeah, when you say water down and to describe that, I was thinking of a kids game that we used to play in the playground many, many years ago when I was once young, or decades ago, as my kids will say. I think most people know it as telephone, and you used to whisper a sentence to some people and it'd go around the circle or group. By the time it comes back, it would be totally different to what it started as. And that is always what I think of when I say, oh, we're going to have, Bob capture the requirements and he'll tell Steve and he'll pass it on to the engineers. Like, there's so much chance of miscommunication there, misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Does Bob know enough about the customer name and the software, what you're doing? Does Steve understand both sides of that? Do the engineers then get that information where, as you say, could get watered down or miscommunicated? So we should really make engineers customer facing, and arguably that's what a lot of Agile has been about. Extreme programming pushed us to get a customer on the team. We still don't seem to do that in very many places. Have you tried putting a customer on the team, and what's been your experience of that?
Yes. So I have done it and seen it the most, probably actually in the hardware space. I've seen it a little bit in software, but I've seen it the most in hardware. So whether it's nuclear or material handling, I have seen brilliant engineers who have mastered this art of emotional intelligence, mastered social skills to the point where sometimes people forget that they're engineers. And and I say it lovingly because it's happened to me. I've had, I'll have these amazing conversations with people and they'll, ask me about my background. I'm like, oh, I'm a nuclear engineer. And they go, what? And I'm like, yeah, like I also have this very technical degree, which allows me to ask you the right questions to get to the root of your problem. And they're like, but you're so different. I'm like, because I've worked on these skills that make me comfortable having the hard conversations with you. And I have seen it done so well when you harness the power of your skills of asking questions, because that's what we engineers do, right? We want to dive in, we want to dig in, we want to really like get to the root of something, because we care about efficiency. So we're not Band-Aid people. We are, let's like get in there and, pull the weed out. So get it at the root. So it's really going to fix the problem. And I've seen it done well where there are some people that just naturally have this ability. I love that, right? A lot of that, just those people kind of like fall into solution engineering type roles really easily. But then there are some, like one of my old bosses was one of the most incredibly brilliant electrical engineers that I've ever worked with. And he started as a controls engineer in the company. And because he had this really, um, it was empowering, but also disarming way of asking customers questions. It allowed him to move into roles where he was estimating things, and the like non-technical like account managers were like, hey, my customer's having these types of problems, can you help us understand what would be the right fix? And little by little he just started getting pulled into more and more conversations, to the point where he was the senior vice president of solution engineering or solution design for the company. And he's now like the foremost expert. He actually essentially designed the first Amazon warehouse, because he was an engineer and knew the real problems and could ask and articulate it in a way that the end customer could really understand. So I have seen it done really well, but it's a combination of like, yes, there's some of us that have that skill, but then there's also some really great organizations that will like tease it out of you and kind of foster that and give you spaces for you to learn and practice those skills to get better.
So I was going to ask the follow-up question, which was the obvious one there of, is this a skill you have to be born with, or is it teachable and learnable? But you've kind of hinted at the answer there. So perhaps you could expand on that, and how much you feel is innate ability and how much is teachable or learnable.
Yeah. So I am a big fan of like the combination of both, right? Nature and nurture. So I I always start with like looking at myself before I do anything, right? So if I look at my own skills, because I've always been a person that asks questions, and it served me really well as an engineering student because it helped me continue to get to, again, the root of the problem. Asking like, why do we do it this way? Why do I need to? I mean, to be fair, it really annoyed my like elementary school teachers when they would teach me math.
Yeah, I've had kids like that keep asking why,
Yeah,
why.
yeah,
So it
exactly.
just is. I don't know.
Yeah, right? And you're like, okay, that was a very extreme emotional reaction to me asking why. But it again, there's that nature in me when I would hit that point of somebody be like, I don't know, or this is stop asking me questions. I'm like, okay, I hit something. I don't know what I hit, but I hit something. But it was those moments in my childhood where I was like, okay, I know I need to get to the root of something, and I'm always going to ask these questions. And that really made me a great engineer. But it was learning the art of asking the right questions in the right way, kind of to your point earlier. I love this idea, and here's how we make it real, versus I love this idea, but here's all the things we have to do, right? That distinction is something that is a learnable skill. And for me, I was very fortunate to have a mentor who, and to be fair, I never thought about my questioning ability as a skill until I had this amazing mentor look at me one day, and she like we'd been in a bunch of meetings together, and I asked my questions, and she pulled me aside and she goes, "You ask the best questions," and it just I was like, "Wow, why do you say that?" Like that was my first question. Why do you think I ask great questions? And she was the first person that ever really gave me that self-awareness to just to realize like there was an art to asking a question. And for me, I learned it through trial and error, through asking them the wrong way and getting a lot of like pushback and like annoyance from people, to learning to ask it the right way, and people leaning in and getting excited about the questions that I was asking. And I would get comments from people in real time in meetings, saying things like, I don't know how you did that, but we've been trying to get this answer for a year and you just got it in 30 seconds. So it is a very trainable, teachable thing. And it's what I teach university students. It's what I teach companies or engineers at companies as well, and executive leaders. Um, and so much of it comes from that deeper self-awareness of, one, how do you feel when you're asking this question, right? Is it coming from some sort of ego inside of me? Like, because I know for me, I can feel something like rising inside of me when I'm about to ask a question that may seem like a gotcha or fuels something inside of me that makes my ego feel better. Versus I'm just really curious, like, how did we get here? How did you come to that conclusion? I'd love to know how you made that, connection in your brain.
Yeah, and I think the flip side of that is we always need to be thinking about how that other person might be feeling. To go
Yes.
back to my somewhat simplified example of children keep asking why. I think it's great when they show that first couple of times why. It's, they're curious, they're learning, this is brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
But then as they go further and further and further, it gets to the point where I don't know. My kids are finding that there's a limit to my knowledge. I'm going to fail in their eyes. They might have a lesser
Yeah.
opinion. And there's those fragile things in our ego that can sometimes make us get a bit defensive.
Yes.
So I think it's quite key that as we ask these questions, we learn that, why can land brilliantly or it can land very, very harshly, depending on how the other person's feeling,
Mm-hmm.
even if we don't change our intonation. So are there any tips you've got as a little micro lesson we could do on how to use those questions, thinking about how the other person's receiving them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, one of the biggest things that I do in my corporate world is I try to get as much context as possible for a situation before I walk in and start asking questions. So, for example, say there's this enterprise level solution that you guys have been working on, and you have 7 different leaders trying to go 7 different directions, and you've got an engineering team in the middle that is just being pulled in every which way. And you have one lead engineer who's responsible for trying to distill all of this information and make sure that we're going in at least one cohesive way. Um, Before I go into those meetings, if I'm the lead engineer, I have one-on-ones with people, right? The key leaders say, hey, I want to understand like your unique perspective before I walk in and ask the hard questions. So I will have these like one-on-one meetings with people just to kind of, again, get context, get background, like, because again, one of my favorite quotes a friend of mine said is, if it's hysterical, it's historical. So if somebody is having a extreme emotional reaction to a bug fix or changing a design requirement, like there is something deeper going on. So if I'm watching a reaction that is objectively a extreme reaction to something that seems a little simple, um, my immediate response is to de-escalate and say, okay, I understand this is another, like there's something deeper going on here. Either we'll take this specific topic offline, or um, I'll reframe my questions. And I always focus on never attacking or trying to like attack the person. And how did you make this mistake? Or how did you come to this conclusion? It's how did we? And it's always how, not why, because how allows us to think through things logically, whereas why, it feels like a belief attack. Like, why did you make that decision? Why did you think that that was okay? Why didn't you talk to your boss before you did X, Y, or Z? So there is that nuance of like how versus why, and also having the context, as much context as possible before you go in, so you can also give people grace, right? So understanding that they may be in 15 other meetings before they even show up to yours, and if their reaction is again hysterical, you may want to just take a step back and say, okay, this isn't about me, this isn't about this situation, there's something deeper, let's dig into that a little bit offline.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two things I really want to pick up on there. One is the history element. I think too often people forget that. We just assume that if somebody has this very strong reaction, it's what was immediately said.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a brilliant example of this a while back in my career, where somebody sent me an email asking for a meeting about something. And I was in a bit of a rush, so I didn't give it enough attention. But I simply went, yeah, we can have a meeting in my head. So I hit reply to the email with yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's an email, just said yes. Minutes later, I got a call from my boss. This other person's really upset. What have you done to offend them? I'm like, I haven't spoken to them today. What? Yeah, I sent them an email. Let me check what I said.
Mm-hmm.
I open up the email and I thought, can we have a meeting? Yes. It's like, oh, okay, that's a new one. I've offended somebody with the word yes in email. It must have been the tone of voice.
The way they read it in their head.
That was exactly it. Is the way they read it in the head, to them, this was a really big issue. And I just responded, yes, I hadn't given it enough attention. And yeah, they had some personal health issues and medication change. They've been having a very bad time and stressed. So purely from their context and some, history they'd had of people not taking their concerns seriously, that was, how it landed, and it landed really badly. And we talked about it afterwards, and we laughed about it later as things got sorted out, and we had a good professional relationship after that. But very little simple things about, as you say, that history, that context, whatever was going on in their lives outside of it, and then in the past, in people that had the role before me not taking their concerns seriously, it just landed badly. And I think that's a great example of what we were talking about earlier with the yes but and the yes and your how versus why, is these tiny little things that can seem almost significant are absolutely key to how we communicate, how we successfully communicate, and how we avoid these issues. And I think a lot of software engineers, and maybe I'm stereotyping based on my experience, because I certainly took way too long to realize how these simple changes of language make a huge difference. And I still tell people about changing yes but to yes and still find a lot of software engineers push back and say, well, whoever I'm talking to shouldn't be such a snowflake. And to a certain extent, that might be true, but
Yeah,
you don't know what they're going through. You don't know what their background is. You can't change them. Whatever they should or shouldn't do, you have no control of. You have
exactly.
100% control of yourself. So try and do the best you can,
Yeah.
and hope that works for the other person. But
I
certainly don't put barriers up.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I wholeheartedly agree that it is always about remembering what is within your realm of control and remembering that you're not intending to cause harm. So if you as an individual can make things slightly better for somebody by just changing one word in your sentence, why would you not do that? Why would
Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
like, I want, like, that's the engineer in me. I want to make things easier and more efficient for other people. I am not trying to make things more complicated. Um, so I love that. I completely agree. And I also want to hit on something you did as well, because I think that is also the hallmark of an incredibly emotionally intelligent person. It's that you unpacked the tense situation afterwards. You didn't just brush it under the rug and just dismiss essentially that person's feelings if they're going through something outside of work and they were offended by your yes. You went the extra step and said, hey, let's talk about this. And that, I think, is one of the hardest things for people to do, regardless if you're an engineer or non-engineer, right? It is hard to face conflict, whether it's a real or perceived conflict. And I have experienced that so many times in my career, to the point where there was this gentleman that I worked with. We were both directors, and there was just something about the way he spoke that always put at my defenses. Just, we would be saying the exact same thing, but the way he said it made me go into defense mode. And at one point, we had this like very public disagreement. And when I say public, it was just like the leadership team, and we were talking about something that was going on with our teams. And I thought I was offering advice, and he was just taking it as an attack. And you could feel the tension in the room. And so luckily we were all at an offsite. And so we went to dinner afterwards, and I made sure to sit next to him at dinner so we could talk about it and I could diffuse this tension that we felt between each other. And it was one of the first times we'd really worked together. So I didn't know a ton about him. And the more we talked at dinner, the more I just got to know him as a human and understood that the way he talks is not about me, and it's not about who he's talking to. It's just, that's how he communicates. So it helped me, one, just again, humanize him. That's just the way he communicates. It's not an attack. It's just his tone. and also give him a little like, hey, this is how this felt for me when you said these things or how you said these things. And he was like, no one's ever talked to me like this before. No one's ever given me that kind of feedback. And I'm like, well, thank you. I'm super happy to have this conversation. Thank you for being open to this kind of discussion with me. And I had one of the other guys pull me aside the next day. He goes, did you literally just spend dinner talking about that tense situation that you had? And I said, yes. And he was like, oh, I would never do that. I would just, he's like, that's so strange that you just like addressed it. And I was like, what, why is that strange to me? I don't like tension. I want to resolve it. And I want to find a way forward, and because we're going to work together. Why would I make it intentionally hard for myself by not trying to resolve this issue with this person? And he actually started, he's like, well, that's a good idea because there's some people that I just don't like working with. And I was like, you could probably talk to them about it and see if you could fix that. And he started doing it little by little. And he was like, I actually enjoy my job now. And I was like, it's amazing. Super happy for you.
You just reminded me of so many things as you're talking there, Nikki. And
Yeah.
I think it's great that you made the effort to sit next to them and give them the feedback. That's so important. And I wish more people were like that. Turning that down and putting myself in his position,
Mm-hmm.
I have always sought feedback. I have
Mm-hmm.
always aligned my ego around learning. I feel it's been a good day if at the end of the day I'm better than I was this morning. I've learned something. So I've always been quite active in seeking feedback. Now, one of the big problems I've noticed is that people, especially around soft skills, are always far more hesitant about giving that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I've found quite difficult is despite asking for feedback quite a lot of times, people wouldn't do it. And then people would say, well, I don't like working with that person, or so-and-so upsets me, or, well, you upset me this, John, but I don't want to say anything and upset you. It's like, why not? Let's have had that conversation a year ago instead of butting heads for a year.
Yes.
And let's figure out how we work together, as you put it earlier, more efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
But so often we avoid those difficult conversations when actually most of us want to learn and get better. We're open to the feedback. Okay, if you come and start the feedback as, you suck, why do you always do this? Yeah, it's going to land badly. But if you come along as, hey, can I give you a bit of feedback on how this made me feel? And you talk about the situation. And as you say, you talk about the how, and you talk about how things made you feel, rather than why did you say it this way? It's like, as you say, perhaps when you said it this way, this is how it made me feel. This is how I felt. I thought you might appreciate that feedback. We could all learn so much better, but a lot
Yeah.
of people aren't doing that. And it's really weird that we don't, as engineers, think about how much more efficient we could be. We'll talk about optimizing code. We'll talk about optimizing hardware design. We'll talk about optimizing processes. But so rarely do, and I love that you put it as being more efficient on the communication. Maybe that's how we need to start selling soft skills to engineers of all sorts. This is how
Yes.
we become more efficient before we even get to processes. And if we were more efficient in this communication, we could have less meetings. We could spend more time
Yes.
doing the work.
Yes. I thank you for saying that. It sounds so novel to so many people, but it's just how my brain works. Like I'm an engineer and I kind of put everything into some sort of like engineering technical term or technical framework. And I think you hit on something that I talk about a ton with my university students. And the simple fact is when you're in university, you are essentially in this bubble. It's a wonderful bubble, and I fully support the academic system, but you're essentially trained not to ask questions, right? Like you don't push back on your professors, right? You do the assignment, don't ask me why, just this is the homework that you have to do. And you're also doing it in what we call like ideal conditions, right? So you are essentially wiring your brain to think that everything is an ideal condition, and you're also focused on being measured as an individual, right? It's a very individual measurement system in academia. There's very rare moments where you have team projects, and even if you do, you're still graded as an individual. Then you get thrown into the real world, and you are never graded as an individual. you are always measured as your impact to the greater whole and you as a part of a team. And it becomes an asset or a liability. Like you become essentially an asset or liability based on how well you perform in the team setting, not just as an individual anymore. Because even if I am writing code just for like my piece of the project, I still have to hand it to somebody else. I still have to integrate what I'm doing with somebody else in some way. And if I'm not thinking about my upstream or downstream partners at all times, then I'm inefficient. I am causing the problem that I'm trying to alleviate at the same time. So I thank you for the validation of using the term efficiency, because I love when we talk about emotions and we talk about feelings. Like, you're absolutely right. People say those terms like snowflake, and I also talk about this in the university setting, not a ton in corporate, but I do bring it up. It's that we didn't really start thinking emotions or feelings had any purpose in our lives until the 1990s. All the prevalent research from like Stoicism in the ancient Greeks up to the 90s, everybody was deliberately taught that your emotions are noise, that they are, meaningless, they're distractions, you have to suppress them. And then that gets compounded, especially for us as engineers, because we're supposed to be so like technically minded, put on the blinders, don't think about how you feel, right? You're a machine. We're not, we're human beings. And it really wasn't until the 90s where that term emotional intelligence, right, from Daniel Goldman came out, where we actually definitively proved we have these emotion systems for a reason. So I know engineers, right, when we say the words feelings, we're like, it's not for me. It's not my space. Like, I'm not a psychology major. Like, why are you talking to me about how you feel? But it is efficiency. And if you are showing up with ego or somebody else is showing up with ego, regardless of whatever technical problem you're trying to solve, if you do not address the human emotions that are in the room, because they're always there, you're never really going to get to solve the things that you want to solve.
Yeah, and it's funny that we say, we're an engineer, we don't deal with feelings. Then just go and look at how heated we get into debates about tabs versus spaces, or List versus Python, or TDD or not T. Yeah, we definitely do feelings. We're kidding ourselves if we think not. I wanted to hit on something you mentioned there about how software teams work. And we have this concept that I know many people hate of this. There's so many different takes on this. And one of the things that I still see, again, many software engineers believe is, I think probably because they think they are a 10xer, because they're a very, very good developer, or at least they believe they are. And I see this pushback where they say, I should be given, or the 10x developer should be given unlimited time to go and work uninterrupted on their own. Go and let them do the magic. Don't make them talk to product managers. Don't make them talk to the rest of the team, because they're super efficient. And my argument with that has always been, well, they're not, because very, very rarely do we build software that's small enough that one person, even if they are 10x, can build alone. And if they are this kind of dinosaur, ogre, stereotype 10xer that has to sit in a room and churn code without talking to people, how are they going to know what to build? Where are they going to get the understanding of what the problem is and the domain knowledge from? So I think it's really important we remember as software engineers that we have that bigger picture. We're doing things in a team. And if you produce 10x of value, no matter how great it is, but you can't give it to somebody else, you can't communicate how to use it or what to do with it next, that all that value for it is going to get lost. It's just going to disappear.
And it also goes into asking the question or explaining why you're doing something. Because if you are this amazing software engineer and you are just building code to build code, but you haven't talked to a customer, there's no one out there that's really interested, like, how do you even know what you're doing is valuable if you're not talking to people, whether it's the end user or your internal team that's going to use the stuff? There's one of my favorite professors in college used to say that in no world are you ever going to be locked in a room with just a calculator and a pencil and told to build a rocket ship. You are always going to be around other people, and you are always going to have access to resources. And I think we as engineers pride ourselves in our ability to solve our own problems and solve things by ourselves. But I think that's cutting off something that's really important, and that's our humanity. Like, we are a communal species. We are meant to share and learn and collaborate. It's what makes a good idea better. It's what actually takes you to that 10x space, because you are talking to someone and you are really solving a larger problem than just the thing that you think you're solving for.
Yeah, absolutely. And, probably a poor example because I'm coming up on the spot, but, if somebody really wants an electric car to take 4 people to, I don't know, let's say a gig, and you're an amazing engineer and you say, you hear that they want transport and you build them this amazing mountain bike, cool. You might have been 10x at producing this amazing mountain bike, but it's not what they needed. It's going to move one person, not 4 people. You've solved the wrong problem. You may have solved it incredibly efficiently in the most stunning way possible, but if it's the wrong problem, it's far less valuable. So we've talked a little bit there about how we need to work with people, but I want to pivot slightly now, because you mentioned about building leadership capacity without adding more meetings. So let's kind of satisfy the other side of engineers, in that we all hate meetings. We want less of that. So how can all these feelings and soft skills and all this be used to talk to people less, have less meetings, and more time to actually do our work?
Yes. So I have seen this play out on my own team first, before I started talking about this with other people. And the biggest way I got myself out of meetings is by allowing my team to make their own decisions. And that sounds so simple, and yet it's so novel, because I know too many leaders that never really felt comfortable transitioning from doer to leader, and they feel like they have to be a part of every discussion. You don't. I hate to be the one to break the news, but you simply do not. Your job as a leader is to set the strategy and make sure your team has everything they need to be successful to run without you. My team, it was so much fun because I never had to be involved in the minutia details. They would go, they would do, and if there was a roadblock, they would come to me and say, "Hey, I'm stuck here." And I'd say, "Awesome, let me remove that roadblock for you, and now you can go run and do even more." There are moments, right, where they're like, "Hey, I want to validate the decision that I made," and I would give them feedback. I also took full responsibility for every decision they made, right, because they were my team, and that is also a hard thing for some leaders to do, to have to take responsibility for other people's actions. But again, that's your job as a leader. So I think if you really want to get out of meetings and let your engineers do engineering, you have to trust them to make their own informed decisions, but make sure you've given them everything they need to make the best decision possible.
I agree entirely with that. I think the problem a lot of people have with responsibility is that they assume that they think of delegation more as abdication. It's like, here's some decisions that you're making, go do it. And that's not the right way. What we need is, yes, you guys should make the decisions. I either totally trust you because I know that you have the right knowledge and experience, or I don't totally trust you because you haven't got the experience and skills, whatever. So my job as a leader is to get you to that point as soon as possible.
Yes.
So if you're not willing to take responsibility for your team, you should really be reflecting of, why am I not willing to take responsibility for them? What is the gap, and what am I not giving them in either the personal development, the information, or the capability within the team to make the right decision? And again, that's partly, I think, because as you touched on before, we find it very hard when we transition from individual contributor to manager to let go of the things we're doing. I was the best ex-coder. I should keep doing that. And it's no, I was. So if I'm now not, who's stepping up to fill the gap? How do I train them? How do I develop them? Or who do I hire? How do we fill that gap that's created by me not doing that anymore? I think that's what too many of us forget.
Yeah, no, I very much agree.
Cool, thank you. So spinning that around a little bit, if we're one of those engineers on that team, What advice would you give them to communicate with more influence? What can they do, kind of pushing up and to influence things?
So I think it's a skill that engineers already have. I think we just forget how to use this language, but it's all about communicating with impact. So a lot of times, again, we love efficient communication, and so we err on the side of thinking less is more, and so we just say like, "Here's the problem, let me fix it." But you're not telling me why, right? Like, why is this problem important? Why do we need to fix it? What's the bigger impact of not fixing it? What's the revenue or what's the business benefit from if we actually fix it? So there's an art, right? It's a bit of storytelling with impact. So taking the data that you're already living and breathing and learning how to tell it in a story form so that non-engineers can understand. Um, I think, again, if we go back to like us thinking we're not emotional people as engineers, every problem that we're solving is an emotional one for someone else. So it's really important for us to understand the emotional impact, whether it's like on the business or on our upstream or downstream partners, and tell that story, right? Start with, hey, I know that we're frustrated because these buttons keep moving. Like the number of times I would have people on my team get really frustrated with product updates because the button that they were so autopilot used to going to was now on the left side of the screen instead of the right. And change is emotional. But like addressing that and saying, hey, here's the frustration that I'm hearing from you. Here's what I'm proposing as a way to solve for that, right? That it's not the technical thing. I don't need you to tell me how you're specifically fixing the code so this doesn't happen again. Just walk me through. You understand and you validate how I'm feeling or understand the challenge that's really in front of us. And then you're proposing a impactful way to solve for that, not just throwing me numbers and data and saying, here's the 5 lines of code that I've done that will solve this issue. Tell me why.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we really forget about that is I can't remember where I saw this mentioned more recently about boardrooms, but it's true all the way from engineers all the way up to the boardroom is 99% of us do not make data-driven decisions. We kid ourselves that we do.
Mm-hmm.
We make emotional decisions, and then we try and find the data to justify that decision. So that
Yes.
brings us right back to, as you were saying that, I was thinking of some of the consulting frameworks, and I think there's one from McKinsey. I know everyone hates consultants, but one of the frameworks they have is about telling a story. What is the situation? Where are we? How did we get here? What's changed? Why is now the time? What are the options? And what am I recommending we do? And that's all about that storytelling. And it's driving that emotional journey of, oh, I now recognize the problem. I feel the pain. I want to solve it. Okay, here's the solution. Oh, I like this solution. And then the data's just there to back up that emotional decision and bring people along, which I think brings us nicely to another thing you mentioned, is how engineers can build trust with non-technical stakeholders. So I think the storytelling is part of that. What else would you add, Nikki?
I would really focus on making meaningful connections. I know it sounds very sometimes big and scary when you're like, what do you mean make meaningful connection? Like, I this was something like I actually got a lot of pushback on when I was a people leader and I was teaching my team this. I would tell them like, one, don't make small talk. I like there's so much grounded research in the fact that humans hate small talk. We want to talk about meaningful things from the get-go. So when you're starting your meeting, whether it's with a big group or a small group, right? Don't talk about the weather. Don't talk about,
You're destroying the whole British society is built on us moaning about the weather.
I'm so
We'll have
sorry.
nothing to talk to each other about.
Oh, there's so much more, right? We know there's so much more. And it's a gateway, right? We use it as this like really simple gateway to opening the door to conversation. But most of us engineers and most people I know, right? We want to talk about things that are more meaningful and important to us, whether it's our families, our hobbies, why we became engineers, why we love doing what we're doing. So I I actually have this set of 26 questions to build connection that I give all of my students. And some of them are like, they feel very innocuous questions. Like they feel like, oh, icebreaker. Like I think the very first one is, if you were going to be famous for something, what would you be famous for? And on the surface, right, it sounds like a really simple question, like, oh, I want to be a rock star. Okay, cool. You can totally answer that way. But okay, tell me why. Why do you want to be a rock star? Right? You're opening the door to something more meaningful. It's like, oh, well, I really want to be able to use my platform to talk about X, or talk about, or be able to run a charity or fund a charity to do things. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Now I know something deeper and more meaningful about you. And it opens the door for me to share something about me. Like, oh my gosh, I also like, I want to open a vegan sanctuary. I want to just save all the animals, and I want to run a bakery that funds the vegan sanctuary. Oh, that's amazing. Like, you have this ability, we all have this ability, right, to go deeper into conversation. And we also have to remind ourselves, like, yes, we have a time limit in our meetings, right? Like, say I've got a 30-minute meeting. I don't have time to waste with small talk or making meaningful connection. But I promise you, and there's data to back this up, if you spend time investing in a relationship with someone, the back half of your conversation is exponentially more efficient because you have spent the upfront building a real connection with a real person on the other end of the phone, so that anytime you do have to have hey, this is a really quick thing, I only have 5 minutes, you're going to get what you need in those 5 minutes because you've invested in the relationship upfront. So I regardless of even if it's another technical stakeholder, right? If it's engineer to engineer, we know what we love to talk about. We know it's super easy for us to fangirl about our favorite things. But we also know, if I'm doing it with a non-engineer, we also all love to fangirl about the same things, whether it's the book we're reading or the sports team, whether it's the soccer team or the football team that we love. There's always a way to make a connection with someone and remember to humanize each other before you get into the technical work.
Yeah, I love that. And I think there was a great podcast I listened to last year that had some great examples that I've promptly forgotten, but I've kind of interpreted for some of my own. And some of the things that I recommend people try asking now are things like, what was the highlight of your weekend?
Yeah.
Or what's been the best bit of your week so far? So it's very innocuous. It's not quite as, might make people think this is a trick question. If you like, what did you want to be as a kid? Sometimes we don't want to answer things like that, or they can feel a bit weird. But what was the highlight of your weekend, or what's the best book you read recently, or something? It can be, it's fairly open, and people can choose to disclose as little or as much as they want. And as you say, it's much better than just talking about the weather. It opens up that opportunity to explore that.
Mm-hmm.
And again, even if we don't know somebody, you can go somewhere with some of those questions. Or nowadays, we're all on LinkedIn. You've got plenty of scope just to pop on somebody's profile, see what they've written about, see if they've got a blog. If you're interviewing somebody and they've got on their CV, oh, you worked X, something interesting about that more. What was the best thing about working at Y company? Or what did you love about this project that you did? It's so much more interesting. It gives somebody a chance to open up and talk about what they loved or what they enjoyed, what they learned from it. And there's so many things we can ask. What was the highlight? What did you enjoy? What's the best thing you learned from that project? Or something that's, as you say, avoids the small talk, and we can get into, so you've worked for 10 years in Python. What is it you love about Python? Again, that's a much easier conversation to dig into than what's the weather like?
Yeah. Yeah.
Although, you've destroyed it for Brits now.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But I know you Brits can rise to the challenge, right? Like, I know there's something more meaningful you want to talk about, but I appreciate that. You're absolutely right. We all deeply want to connect with one another, right? Especially in a world that's like moving towards AI, when you don't really know what's human anymore. When you have an opportunity to connect with a real person in real time, use it. Take advantage of it. Like, it feeds us. We're wired for that connection, right? So it's it's not as challenging as it may seem, and it's a way to get away from that term networking, and more about just building connection with people, right? Asking real questions about their real lives. People love to talk about themselves. So give them an opportunity to ask them a
Yeah.
question.
To give another great example, guitars behind me on the wall.
Yes.
I've had probably more feedback about the guitars than any other topic on the podcast, with people reaching out going, are those guitars really left-handed or is it the camera? And asking questions about the guitar, so it's, again, it's a bit different small talk, and it's led to some interesting conversations and some internet friends, some of whom I'll hopefully meet one day, some of whom I might not, because they're 5,000-6,000 miles away, but we've got a common interest now we can talk about.
Yes, yeah, and I had something very similar happen to me yesterday. I was at a coffee meeting with somebody. He runs a software, what's the word I'm looking for? Conference here in Knoxville called Code Stock. We were kind of talking about the conference. I was going to be speaking at it, and we eventually got into, because I love asking people like their engineering origin story, and so we were kind of talking about it, and we got into naturally just like deeper, more meaningful conversation. And we got into the topic of my work, and he asked me if I had read Dan Brown's most recent book. And my eyes just lit up, because Dan Brown is the reason that I got into nuclear engineering. Like I have so many Dan Brown books on my shelf. I have signed Dan Brown books on my shelf. I'm obsessed. And so now, like, I don't know a lot of engineers that are also Dan Brown fans. And so now I have this like incredibly deep, and I feel so close to him because he sees a part of me that not a lot of people get to see or experience. So there's this like, again, this amazing, deep emotional connection you can get with someone if you just share a little bit about you or ask them a little bit about themselves. And it just opens the door for everything to be easier, because when you get in, because it makes it so much easier to do the hard things. So say you're in the thick of it, because I know engineers, we love to trauma bond. We love to like be in the trenches together and do the hard things. But I don't know if anybody else has noticed this, but those engineers, those relationships, whenever you get together after the trauma is over, right? You're done, solving problems in real time on the customer job site. That's all you really talk about is, you remember that hard thing that we did, and you just complain about that hard thing that you did, and you're not really feeding the relationship anymore. And all of a sudden you've kind of run out of things to talk about when you exhaust that hard thing that you went through. So it's really important for us to invest in relationships with each other, so that when we do go through the hard things, yeah, we can go through them and we can survive them, but we can also come out stronger and have deeper relationships where we can talk about more meaningful things than just that really hard thing that we did on the customer job site in real time.
Yeah. And go back to your origin story.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. That makes it so much more interesting, and it makes it so much easier to relate to somebody. To put that in a concrete example, I saw one of your posts on LinkedIn like a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Liked it, thought it was interesting, thought it was a really interesting topic. But it was when I looked at your profile and I saw, I think you had a link to another podcast you'd been on at the time, where you talk about your origin story. And I thought that was really fascinating, and so many bits of it resonated with me.
Thank you.
That was like, this is somebody interesting I want to talk to. I want to learn more. And I thought would be a great guest for Coding Chats to talk about your origin story. But then as I dug into it and got to know you more, I thought I really want to talk about this. So maybe sometime you come back and talk about your origin story, because it's been great talking about the soft skills now. And your origin story is really interesting. I think quite unique.
Thank you.
And I'd love to dig into more of that. And I think people would find it very, very interesting. So perhaps that's another time, as we've gone over and I've taken quite a lot of time. Maybe I can just end on one question then. How can engineers lead with confidence without pretending to be somebody they're not? So staying true to the origin story, if you will.
Yeah. So this is the best and most toxic thing about me. But I have an unhinged level of confidence because I'm a nuclear engineer.
Okay.
So
I'm curious.
Hear me out. Hear me out. So I truly believe that getting an engineering degree is not for the faint of heart. Like, you are a brilliant, incredible mind if you can make it through engineering school and come out the other side and like have that as part of your identity, right? It's not your whole identity, but it is a huge part of what makes you who you are. And when I first, came out of engineering school, right? Again, they when you're in school, they kind of they definitely try to knock your confidence. They're like, you don't know a lot. You're not an engineer yet, right? So you go into the workforce and you make yourself small. I spent a lot of time making myself small early in my career. I had very little confidence when I first came out of school, and I didn't get a job in nuclear fresh out of college, but I did get a job in mechanical. So for the first, I'd say, I don't know, maybe year of my career in material handling, when people would find out that I'm a nuclear engineer, they would kind of like back up and be like, whoa, you're really smart. And I'm like, and I would literally make myself smart. I'm like, no, I'm normal. I'm just like you. And I'm not that smart. And I would downplay the hard work that I did to get this degree. And it finally took this amazing mentor of mine. She was the vice president of the supply chain. She pulled me aside one day and she was like, Nikki, you have to stop making yourself smaller to make other people feel comfortable, because like not everybody can get the degrees that we get, right? It's not everybody can get an engineering degree. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of grit. It takes a lot of passion to do what we do. And whenever we make ourselves smaller to make somebody else feel more comfortable or make them feel smarter than us, it just diminishes us, and it also eats away at our own confidence. So it was an act. It was a conscious action to own my degree, to own the fact that I'm an engineer and use it to feed that confidence that I have in myself now. I did not at the beginning, but I do now. And like I said, right, it has become the best and sometimes the worst thing about me, because I I think of any problem, right? I don't care what the problem is, whether it's like tackling a massive organizational culture shift, or we're in the middle of a home renovation right now. And I watched some YouTube videos on how to lay the like click floors. And I have the unhinged confidence to say, I'm a nuclear engineer. I can figure this out. Sometimes I can. So sometimes I absolutely can do it. But there are other times where I need to just rein that confidence in. But the simple answer is, for engineers that want to build their confidence without changing who they are, own your degree. Own the fact that you are an engineer, because it's not for the faint of heart. It is a very amazing, and you are so brilliant if you have been able to secure one of these degrees and get to use this degree in real time. So own it. Own who you are.
Absolutely. I love that. I think that more of us should do that. More of us should be confident in that. As you say, there's a balance to be achieved, isn't there? We don't want to come across toxically, but if we had more confidence in that and we owned it, I think we'd also cut out a lot of toxicity as well. People would feel less need to defend themselves, less need to attack somebody else's position. So again, plays to those soft skills, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I that's a really important point, because I don't know if this is everywhere, but it's something I've noticed, that there's like a hierarchy when it comes to engineering degrees. And I've noticed, like, I don't tell a lot of people that I'm a nuclear engineer, because they feel that they need to prove themselves in some way to me. So there are times where it's more just like me having my own confidence in my own abilities. It's not something I will openly just say, like, I'm a nuclear engineer, listen to me, right? That's not confidence, that's cockiness.
Yes, there's a fine line, isn't there?
There's a fine line, right? And it really is, that fine line is just being comfortable and secure in yourself, right? Confidence is not about what you're pushing out on other people. It's what's going on inside of you and how you feel when someone is questioning you, or someone's questioning a situation that you've been a part of, or your work, right? It's, nope, I did my best. I'm an engineer. I used my skills. And if you're attacking the work or you're questioning something that got done, you're not attacking or questioning me as a human. We're both looking at this thing objectively. And I think that's the real important part of owning the fact that you're an engineer is we do have an amazing ability to remain objective. So tap back into that skill because we have it as engineers that we can remain objective. We need to own our emotions, but we also have the ability to remain objective. So that's where that fine line of owning your engineer degree and owning who you are, and also not like pushing it on other people. That
Perfect. And if we do that, we can actually achieve that goal that so many of us talk about in engineering of strong opinions weakly held. Because we have the confidence to go, well, actually, you've given me some more data. I've learned something new. I know better now. I can change my decision because we're less emotionally attached to it and we're more confident in who we are, confident that we're doing we're changing our minds for the right reasons. Right. That's awesome, Nikki. I've taken more of your time than I promised to. So thank you very much for your time.
of course.
If anyone wants to reach out to you and talk more about soft skills, how can they best get in touch? Don't worry about spelling out URLs or anything. We'll put them in the show notes. But how's best for them to reach out?
Yeah. Well, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn. And yes, we'll throw the website in the show notes, and there's plenty of ways you can connect with me on there as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Nikki. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You.
Really enjoyed it.
Me too. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of Coding Chats. If you did, please like and subscribe. And feel free to check out these other videos on a similar topic.